All right. Hey, what's up, guys? Coach Mac, Play Fast Football. Glad you guys can join us on a Thursday night for a YouTube live session. Thursday night before the AFCA convention, which is the big convention, in the coaching industry. If you are a coach in the United States or even, internationally, the quote unquote Football Coaches Association is the big event, the one that garners the most attention. Usually gets the biggest combination of high school and college and middle school and probably every coach that you can imagine at the convention, because it is a convention, not necessarily a clinic, right? It's not the American Football Coaches Association clinic. It's the American Football Coaches Association convention. So I will be in Nashville this weekend. If any of you are there, or if any of you are in attendance, I would love to meet up with some of you and put faces to names, talk football live in person, if that is possible. But obviously we are coming off the end of the bowl season. We're coming off the end of the first round of college football playoff games, and now we're getting into the national championship game. So I think there's plenty of stuff for us to talk about tonight. Most of you know, or you should know if you follow the channel, that I am an Alabama fan. So obviously the result of one of the playoff games was not really what we were looking for. But hats off to Michigan. I think they did what they needed to do. I think they beat us physically up front at times. I think they took our offense and our tendencies and the things that we do well and completely shut them down and made us, kind of one-dimensional. The pass rush, obviously, in the first half and the pressures that they were able to create, I think kind of backed Alabama into a corner to where they chose not to throw the football anymore. And even Nick Saban himself, I think, basically came out and said that, the pressures and the things that were happening to the quarterback kind of got them into a mode where they didn't really want to throw the football anymore. So, they came out in overtime and ran 2 run plays right down Alabama's throat and set the tempo. So, congrats, Michigan. I'm not, I don't live and die by Alabama football. I am an Alabama fan by all means, but, I still have a job that I have to get up and do. I still have to go to work the next day. So, the results of that game don't necessarily dictate my livelihood. But the Washington, Texas game was probably a little bit different scenario. I think the style of football played in those 2 games was, probably almost polar opposites. And now you get to a championship game where, you're going to get a school that plays one style versus a school that plays the other style. And, it'll be interesting to see who can come out on top. For me, the thing that I look at all the time, like in a Michigan-Alabama game, very similar to the Alabama-Georgia game, I think Michigan beat us up front. I think Michigan got after us up front. I think they physically handled us up front, and I think Alabama did the same thing to Georgia, which Georgia has done to every opponent that they played for the last 2.5 years. So, the interesting thing about that is the way the game is being played now, the way the game has trended to move into, it's still at the utmost highest level. It still comes down to who wins up front. It's very hard to win games with just skilled players on the perimeter alone. When you get to the Final Four, when you get to the, upper echelon of who's left in college football, I think it's very easy to say that the teams that win up front are going to be the teams that end up winning the football games. They don't, the talent is not disparaging enough at the skill levels to say that you can survive outside the tackles with superior skill when you get to that penultimate level. I think the game that we play in high school football, I think that the talent is so disparaging that you probably could live outside the tackle box with skill. But at that level, you're not going to get away with it. You're not going to get away with just skilled players outside the tackle box. Taking advantage of other teams when you're in the the playoffs with the four best teams in the country. So interesting to see. Interesting to watch. Obviously, I think from when you're looking at it from a college football perspective, did the committee get it right? Obviously, everybody. We talked a little bit about this last week. Florida State being left out and whatnot. Well, both games came down to the final play of the game. Both games were about as intriguing and interesting as you would want to look at as a fan. So, in my opinion, how did the college football playoff get it wrong? How was it wrong where they had probably two of the most compelling semifinal games that they've ever had? And hopefully the national championship game will be just as compelling. But, I don't think you can say that they got it wrong. I think going back to the comments that I made last week, I still think Florida State deserved to be in based on their resume, based on what they did. But when you look at the argument of the final four teams in and you look at the two playoff games, I don't think you can say that they got it wrong, in my opinion. So, with that being said, you had several other bowl games. It was interesting, until Michigan had beat Alabama, the SEC had walked the dog pretty much with the Big Ten, in almost every game that they had played. And I think Michigan was, the saving grace for them, obviously, to get, I think any conference would take the national championship over 5 or 6 bowl wins, in my opinion. So, hopefully that quells a little bit of the argument about the SEC. And now that the SEC is not in the championship game, I would still venture to say that any of those teams that would have to go through the SEC schedule, especially the SEC West, in my opinion, I would love to see a lot of those teams go through that schedule the entire year and make it out to where, the SEC West team has to make it out to. I still think that's a little bit of a difference, but at the end of the day, there's no SEC team in. There's no SEC bias anymore. The championship game is going to be what it's going to be. So we can eliminate all the bullshit talk about the SEC and what needs to happen and, what should happen. It's two non-SEC teams playing. There's going to be a non-SEC champion. So let's see what the ratings do. Let's see, how it shakes out from there and hopefully move on into a new playoff system that everybody is kind of happy with. Obviously that kid transferred. The center position obviously is important when you're a shotgun team and you're a tempo team and you're trying to change the cadence. I wonder how much of that is actually on Milroe and not just the center. I know the bad snaps that are low and low to the right, are probably physically more the center. But if you're an Alabama fan or you watch Alabama games, to be 14 games into the season and have the same snap count issues that they had almost the entire season, to me is a little bit questionable. When you're a program of that magnitude at that level, yes, there were snaps that physically might have been the center's fault. But, at the same time, I think there were some cadence operation issues, to me at least, to get to the 4th and 30 in the Auburn game, and to get into some other scenarios that happened throughout the year. And then in the national championship game, to me, there's an operating procedure error there. And I don't know whether it's a systemic operation error. I don't know where the errors occurred. Obviously, I'm not there. I don't coach every day. I'm not in the system. But to me, there were a lot of operational errors that seemed to doom Alabama on several drives, more than just the snaps being low and away or, wherever they may have been. So the kid was good enough to be the starting center at Alabama. He was good enough to get the team to the semifinals. He's got to be a great player. And he's already in the portal and looking at places like Ohio State. It's not like the kid's transferring to a Division II school. The kid's obviously one of the best offensive linemen in the country. So he's going to be just fine. Alabama will be just fine. So we'll see what happens from there. Yeah, I think the clap cadence is something that can be effective if it needs to be for whatever reason you can't hear um, a regular cadence. I think the clap cadence certainly gives some deception. As far as when you watch the teams that use clap cadence, the quarterbacks always seem to be mimicking the clap and doing things to kind of draw the defense off, or at least keep the defense at bay from when they can um, get off the ball. But all those things to me are just operational procedures, whether you're traditional cadence, clap cadence, whatever your cadence is, whether the center says the cadence or the quarterback says the cadence. To me, it's more about this, the systemic approach of this is how we do things. This is how we change cadence. This is how we change tempo. Um, and the means to which you can practice and work on all those things so that in game settings, they all seem to function, fairly well. Like I said, as an Alabama fan, too many, to me, operational errors from a program that you think wouldn't have operational errors. There's too many things in there that lead me to believe that it was more than just the center snapping poorly. There's too many games, too many instances, too many scenarios where it's solely on the center snapping the ball poorly. I think there was a lot of systemic issues, procedural issues that need to be addressed and hopefully fixed. And you know, you can debate, argue, everything you want to argue about why they were in that situation, how they got in that situation. You can talk about the last play call. And obviously, in a game of that magnitude that comes down to the last play on fourth down, I don't think it really matters what play you called. If you're not successful, everybody's going to talk about that play and what you called and why you called it. If the defense wasn't successful, you would talk about why they chose to pressure or why they chose to not pressure. So, that's kind of the world we live in, especially in a setting so large, or at least so big. Um, well, I think obviously, obviously, Coach Del Gaze. I'd like to say Joe, but you're still my coach to this day. So, um, I think obviously Michigan had to attack the offensive line of Alabama. I think Alabama's offensive line is the strong point. I think it's, what made them who they were this year. Obviously, as Jalen Milroe got better, but I think the offensive line, the size that they are, the physicality of how they are, I think that you had to attack that portion, because if you sit back and think that you can play, your typical base defense against that offensive line, you probably are not evaluating things very well. So, to me, it seemed like they had a pretty good beat on some of the motions. Some of the slot motions, flat motions across. I think they had some really good tendencies there to where they chose to send a nickel from to the motions and away from the motions. Some of them might have been straight adjustments to where when they got that flat motion, they checked into 5-man pressures. And it was based on where the nickel was, whether the nickel was to the boundary, whether the nickel was to the field. I've watched some of the other guys on social media that have, that somehow find ways to analyze all those things and look at what teams did and how they pressured. But to me, it was more like where the nickel was, and the flat motions got them into some 5-man pressures based on where the nickel was. Sometimes he was to the boundary, sometimes he was to the field, but the rotations behind it looked pretty much the same to me. It looked like they were getting into 3 under 3 deep 5-man pressure, sending the nickel. He came from the boundary sometimes, he came from the field sometimes. Obviously, in today's day and age, they categorize themselves into Sims creepers. I know they got after Alabama's ass with a couple simulated pressures, where they, were showing certain looks and then bringing 3 or 4 off an edge to the other side. And I think they had a pretty good beat on the protection. I think they had a pretty good beat on where the center would turn, based on film and situations. And, again, at the end of the day, they won the game. So obviously they made better adjustments. I saw a lot of people talking about how great the coordinators from Michigan were. Obviously, Jesse Minter on the defensive side of the ball has done some phenomenal things, and his name is, as hot as it could be. I saw nothing in the Alabama game that made me, you know, uh, be enamored or fall in love with what Michigan did on offense. I think they stayed in the game long enough to eventually use the drive that tied things up and obviously get the win in the end. But like I don't look at that game and think of anything Michigan did offensively to say, well, that's revolutionary. That guy is phenomenal. A lot of people online were talking about how the coordinators from Michigan were dialing things up. I didn't see it that way. I think defensively they did a phenomenal job, and Jesse Minter's did a phenomenal job all day. Whether Sharon Moore did a phenomenal job or not, I didn't see anything to me. At the end of the day in regulation, they scored 20 points. They got a little bit of help from Alabama here or there. If Milroe doesn't fumble the ball at midfield, even though they didn't score on a possession where he fumbled, if Alabama is able to run 2 or 3 more plays, who knows how much time comes off the clock. So maybe they don't have a chance to score with 1 minute and 30 seconds left. There's so many scenarios, hidden field position, clock, things like that, you can't really pinpoint on being the be all end all of the game. But I think defensively they did a phenomenal job of forcing Alabama to do things that they really didn't want to do. But at the end of the day, so did a lot of other teams. I mean, Alabama wasn't groundbreaking on offense this year. They weren't world beaters on offense this year. So, I think they did a great job. I think both coordinators are very good at what they do. But I don't look at that game and think that what Michigan did on offense is the next best thing and what everybody should be looking at. That's just my opinion. All right, 4-4 upcoming season, but I feel backers not good at reading. Should I consider twist slants and backer stunts? Yeah, anytime you're a 6-man box with an over front, you're probably going to have to game some things up front. 2-man games, from the 3 and the 5 or the 3 and the 7 side, your single games that you're going to want to run with the open B gap. You're always going to have to. Offenses live in a world where they attack B gaps now. You're always going to have to figure out a way to navigate the open B gap. So you're going to have your stunts from there. How you get the shade involved in your stunts or your games, or things that you do to get the shade involved. Anytime to me you're playing an over front, you're going to have to move. You're going to have to gap exchange. You're going to have to do some things. There aren't a ton of people in what we do in high school football. There, to my knowledge, there aren't a ton of people that can sit in a static over front and do the things that they need to do on defense. I think you're always going to have to move. You're always going to have to make that over front a little bit more dynamic. It's the front everybody wants to see, right? So when you're 4 down over, that's the front every offensive coordinator wants to see. That's what they want to draw their plays to. That's what they want to diagram everything to. So you're already doing the offense a favor by being in a front that they want to see. I think, to me, the way you navigate that is you become more dynamic within the over front. You move more, you stunt more, you cancel gaps, you do things that make the front a little bit more difficult to attack than the static generic over front, which almost every coordinator in the world, including myself, when I do YouTube videos, a lot of times we draw things up and you draw them up to over front. It's easy. You know where everybody is. You know the angles. You know how you're blocking stuff. So to me, I think if you're going to be a 4-down team or an over front team, I think you have to move, just because of the static nature of the front. I think you can declare the 3 technique to some different spots that can make things difficult. On people when you're not always setting the 3 technique exactly where they think you're going to set them. But I think coordinators, kids, players, I think everybody's more comfortable going after and attacking the even front. So I would think that you have to be a little bit more dynamic and you have to be able to move a little bit even in that front. Sorry, my YouTube cat is causing disruptions already. So, but some of the other bowl games were interesting when we look at it, watching some of the teams play, watching how they played. I know it's hard to dictate off of bowl games, certain scenarios because of opt outs and guys that weren't playing, but just to see different systems going against each other, different teams that usually don't play, going against each other. It's good as a coach. It's a good chance to learn, kind of watch the systems go against each other, watch, who has success against other people. Because now, like I mentioned in the YouTube video that I did today or in the YouTube short that I did this morning, to me, the AFCA convention is like the start of the offseason, right? I know that for a lot of us that lost in November, a lot of us that lost a month and a half ago or 6 weeks ago, I know that there's a lot of people that got into their offseason right away and started their offseason right away. But to me, as a coach, when you talk about the growth season, it kind of all starts with the AFCA, right? And it's a different convention than most clinics you would go to. Maybe there's not as much ball as you would like. For me, there's not as much schematics as I would like. A lot of the talks end up becoming culture and um, program building and things like that, which is fine. I mean, there's several opportunities in the off season to go and learn schematics and positional talks. So every clinic doesn't have to be that way. The convention, unfortunately, it sets up to be more of a meet and greet networking deal, which is important in our business. It's important for everybody to network. It's important for everybody to go out there and get their name out there and meet some people. But at the same time, I think when we start the off season, we're all kind of looking at how are we going to get better? What are we going to do as coaches? What are we going to do with our program? Where is our program? What do we need to do with our program? We're all in, everybody on this YouTube live right now and everybody in the coaching world, we're all in different situations, right? So we're all in scenarios where we need to be working on the things that we need to work on to make our team better. Some of us are making systemic changes. Some of us are making schematic changes. Some of us are just wrinkling our systems, or our schemes to better fit what we need to defend or what we need to do to win games. But, most people at this point of the year are not staying status quo, right? You're not going into the offseason to say, hey, let's do everything exactly the same as we did. Most people are looking to make improvements in how they do things. It could be how you practice. It could be your operating procedure on offense or defense. It could be completely systematic or completely systemic or completely schematic within the change that you're making. I know the video that I did today on YouTube, I talked about the evolution of our defense and how, in the last 10 to 15 years, we've gone from 4-2-5 to 3-3 stack to tight 3 high. And, the thing that I hit on in the video that I did was we never changed our structure of coverages behind it. So we've changed the box. We've changed the front. We've changed, obviously anytime you change the box in the front, your run fits are going to change inside the box a little bit. But as far as the support behind it, where the extra fitters are coming from, who the 7th, 8th, and 9th guys in the box are or in the run fit are, if you want to talk about spacing, or the however you want to look at the fancy term for odd spacing, even spacing. To me, it's all about how many guys you can get into the fit, how many guys you can get to at least be around the ball when the ball gets ran that you can count on to make plays, right? So, you can break that down to its simplest terms or its most sophisticated terms. Um, we've never changed that. It's never the box changed for us, and we changed the presentation of how we played the box, but how we fit everything around that from the back to the front never changed. We're a quarters based team. We play 2 open a certain way. We play 3 open a certain way. We play tight end flanker a certain way. We play single side receivers a certain way within our base structures, right? So obviously, we pressure, we move, we do other things, but within our base system, our coverage basically dictates how we play everything from the back to the front. Our coverage dictates who's going to be around the fit, who's going to be involved in the fit, who the extra defenders are, where we're trying to send the ball. To me, it's all about our coverage structure. So, we've gone from 4-2-5 to 3-3 stack to tight 3 high, and the back end never changed one time. I mentioned in the video today that if I had to change and be a middle of the field closed rip Liz match team, to me, that's a big systemic change. That's a big um, philosophical change. For us to go from 4-2-5 to 3-3 stack, it was still six guys in a box. We never changed the box look. When we went from 4-2-5 to 3-3 stack, the box never changed. Now, whether you're slanting and adding guys on to create over and under fronts, whether you're fitting it from a static 3-3 box like we chose to do, we played the 3-3 stack with not as much movement as most people. And we played with heavier five techniques that we expected to spill and gap exchange and do things. And so, our spin on a 3-3 was slightly different maybe than some other people's spins. But, to me, it was still six in a box. We went from a 4-2 structure to a 3-3 structure. We kept the same premises behind it, the same split field coverage concepts, the same, you know, um, check with me defense in a way, if you want to look at it that way. We still handled our secondary to formations and how we played two open and where we set the nickel, and none of that ever changed. And then when we went to tight three high, the system on the back end didn't change either. The only thing we did was the middle safety took the role of the Mike in coverages, and we played all of our same split field coverages. So, in the last 10 to 15 years, I've gone from 4-2-5 to 3-3 stack to tight three high, and the coverage structure behind it never changed one bit. The terminology never changed. How we played formations never changed. There's some years we carry things that we didn't carry in other years. There's some years that we play more of a certain 3-by-1 adjustment. There's some years that we played two open, you know, um, a little bit more in one quarter's adaptation than the other. But the thing that never changes, we started as a middle of the field open quarters toolbox team, and that never changed for the last 15 years. So to me, we were making wrinkles to our system with what the box presentation was. The last 10 years or so, we've been an odd front team, and that's just because the programs that I've been at dictate, that we need to be an odd front team. But we've done it different ways in the odd front. We've done it from traditional stack, we've done it from tight front. Um, so to me, the fact that we play with three safeties and five DBs, and we choose to employ the same coverage structure behind it, to me, that means, it's one of those deals where, you know, um, we didn't really make that big of a change. So, yeah, Dan. So I guess if you were there, if you were at Orange Park, then, with Danny and Corey, then maybe you coached against us at Ridgeview. We only had a few opportunities to beat them the years that they were really well. Before you got there, they were really, really good. If you were at Bradford, then you coached against us at Baker County, and we had a lot of success against them in the year that we played. I think I only played them once with Danny and Corey there, and that game was pretty handily in our favor. We were a 4-2-5 team then, on defense, and so football's a perpetual state of motion. Before you got into the state of Florida, Danny and Corey and some teams that I played against absolutely beat us to death. Um, and then we had our years where we got a chance to return the favor. That's in high school football, kind of the way it works sometimes. But two good football coaches, Danny Green, I have a ton of respect for, with what he's been able to do, the longevity of what he was able to do and where he was able to do it. And then Corey, I've known Corey for a while and have the utmost respect for both of them. And, I've had my moments against them. They've had probably more moments against me. But the way high school football shakes out sometimes, it's more about the roster than it is, the coaching. I had 3 years in a row against them where they were coaching teams that I couldn't score a point on, and couldn't get a first down. And then the following year, we scored almost 70 points against the same coaching staff. So, that's the nature of our business. It is what it is. If you're around long enough, you'll probably get your punches in, and you'll probably take your punches. So, glad to see that you made your way. If you're still here somewhere in Florida, glad to see that you made your way down. And football is pretty good here. 4-day week. We do 4-day weeks, Galaxy. We do Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Um, it's split weight room and speed development. We don't start to do any skill development until February. When we get into February, then once or twice a week, we start to do 7-on-7 stuff um, in the state of Florida with what we're allowed to do and how we're allowed to do it. Obviously, we have spring football. So when we get into April, um, April approaching May, we start to get into spring ball and we can actually practice and we can actually look at fitting runs and running the ball and blocking and tackling and all the things that a lot of people in other states can't look at again until June or July or whenever it may be. But uh, for us, we're 4 days a week. The emphasis is on strength development and speed development, also with injury prevention. We do a lot of prehab stuff with our guys in the off season. There's a lot of stretching. There's a lot of neck exercises. There's um, a lot of things that we're doing to try and keep guys as healthy as we possibly can. Um, I coach the weightlifting team at Bishop Kenny High School right now. So the kids that I have on the weightlifting team, there's going to be a huge emphasis on strength development and maximum output. Because that's what the sport is based on. So for those 2 or 3 months, some of those guys are doing way more heavy volume work than they probably would in a football program. But if I'm going to coach a team, I'm going to coach a team to win and compete. It's the only way I know how to do things, and it's the only reason I kind of get involved in things. So in order for me to win and compete in weightlifting, I have to up the volume. I have to up the load and the intensity in January and February, where maybe you wouldn't do that in a normal program. And then the guys that I have on the weightlifting team that are football guys are going to have to get their speed work and their speed development also because they're still football players. But pretty much for us, we're 4 days a week. We're a combination of strength work and speed work, and then the skill work comes later down the road. And so we get into the middle of or the end of February and then progress our way to March and April towards spring practice. That's just kind of the way we do things. So, um, that's going to depend on where you are in the country, what access you have to your players. We have a pretty good setting where a lot of our guys, you know, it's, it's one of those deals where we have classes where a lot of our guys, we need to have weight room classes at the school I'm at because most of our guys are going to be baseball players or track kids. So we're going to lose a lot of them after school. So in order to make the progress that you need to make in the weight room to be a competitive football team, it's got to be during the day. Again, apologize for my cats that I have. So for us, we have to lift during the school day. I think most of the good programs in the South that do it have their kids during the day. There's a lot of reasons that you would off season wise, strength development and lifting, and not having to worry about after school, not having to worry about who has a job, not having to worry about what sports they play. This is your class. You get a grade in this class. You're in here for 45 minutes. This is what we're going to do. During the season, there's ways where you can take those classes and game plan, watch film, depending on how long they are and what the setup is. So, it's just one of those deals where, it's a necessity for us where we are. I wish some people might do it now. I don't know. They certainly didn't do it when I was in school, but I wish, in the area I grew up in the Northeast on Long Island, I wish they would lift and have team lifting sessions a little bit more often. I probably would have hated it as a player, but in the long run, it probably would have made me better. I would have did it if you told me it was what I had to do to play football because I was going to play football no matter what. So if you forced me to lift, it probably would have been better for me. But I just think it's a better way to do things when you can lift during the school day and you have structured classes with a strength coach that knows what he's doing and knows how to program lifts. That's just, to me, the best way you can do it. So, for scout team offense, how much do you guys do in practice or defensive practice? So, as far as how much we do, Dan, that's kind of an open-ended question as far as, if you're asking, we have obviously several different periods where it's going to be group periods, it's going to be team periods, it's going to be individual periods. You always have to break it down into scenarios where you're defending the things you need to defend, to survive that week. So, There's going to be team periods that are set up by down and distance or scenarios. There's going to be situational periods. There's going to be blitz periods. There's going to be third down periods. So I don't think we're different or that much different than a lot of people. You know, um, to me, this obviously best on best is the way that everybody would like to go, the world that you would like to live in if you could. Um, but to me, uh, it's more about seeing formations and making sure you can identify where certain players are based on what coverages you're going to play or where you're going to set the front. Or, I don't think most teams that I know of, unless you can go best on best, good on good every portion of the practice. Most teams that I've been involved with from a player and a coach perspective, once you get down to quote unquote scout team players, you're never going to get the same look. So whether it's will you get a little bit better look from second string juniors and seniors than you will from starting freshmen? Yeah, I'll agree with that. But there's going to be times where the starting freshman would do just fine because, those segments of practice are more about alignment, seeing formations, getting things called the way we want to. If we have certain movements, pressures, or things that are dictated based on formation or personnel, just being able to see that to me is every bit as important as it is to get, good on good, best on best. Here's another interesting. I know a lot of people probably don't like hearing this, but if my good on good is nowhere near the good on good of what I'm going to see on Friday, does it really make that big of a difference? So if I go best on best, good on good, and I'm playing a team that is just off the charts more talented than I am, my best can't replicate the look they're going to give me anyways, from a talent standpoint, from a get off standpoint, from a strength standpoint, from a speed standpoint. So, you know, best on best, good on good is probably the closest we can get to matching that scenario. But if I'm going to play a team that is far more talented, so if Vanderbilt does good on good all week to get ready to play Alabama, are they really replicating the look that they're going to get on Saturday? If you want to look at it from that perspective, as a college football team, obviously they're in the SEC East, not the West. They don't play Alabama every year, but they have to play Georgia, right? So if Vanderbilt does best on best, good on good to get ready for Georgia, is their best or their good going to be able to replicate the look that they're going to get from Georgia? Probably not. Is it the closest they can get for their team? Yes, I agree with that 100%. But the closest they can get still doesn't come close to replicating what they're going to see in the game. So to me, you'd be better off with quality reps to say, hey, look, if we're facing a tempo team and we've got to use freshmen or younger kids on offense to get the reps that we need to go against two huddles. We need to do things differently to prepare for a tempo team. The reps that I'm going to get versus those two huddles are way more important to me than what those freshman linemen might be able to do or not do. Now, they got to be able to read a card. I will say that. They've got to be able to execute a scheme so that we can read it and fit it. Do they have to block it perfectly? No. Do they have to be physically dominant? No, because I think if you go to any level of football, hell, if you went to the NFL, I don't think the scout, the quote unquote practice players in the NFL, I don't think they can give you the same look of the best team that you're going to face, right? If you're going to play the Dolphins or you're going to play the Ravens, how many, or the Niners per se, or whatever, like how many NFL teams have practice squad players that can emulate or simulate the same look that they're going to see on Sunday? So even at the highest level, I think it's almost impossible. Obviously, it's the best competitive situation we can get ourselves into. Obviously, it's the best scenario to get a remotely decent look at where you think you are talent wise. But, when push comes to shove, if you're playing a really, really good team that is more talented than you are, well, there's a good chance that you're not going to be able to replicate what they do anyways. Another scenario I'll give you, if you're playing a wing T team and your system is not wing T, um, you know, as long as they can read a card, your freshman guys will give you almost the same look you need to see. As long as the right guys pull, as long as you get the down blocks where you need to get them in the backfield action the way you need to get it, you're never going to be able to run the wing T the way that team does Friday night. So even if you took your best players, if you were a shotgun 11 personnel team or a shotgun 10 personnel team or whatever the scenario is, if you took your best players on offense and put them in a wing T scout group setting, they're not going to be able to execute the plays as good as the team you're going to play Friday night. So I am okay with using freshmen. I am okay with using younger guys. I am okay with the scout look not being as physically um, imposing per se as it could be with best on best. Do I think you need best on best situations in practice? Hell yeah, I think you do. Do I think there's a time and a place for best on best? Hell yeah, I think there's a time and a place for best on best. Do I think it's the be all end all of everything you do to say that that's the look you need for Friday? No, because based on the team you're playing and the system they're running, I don't know if you're ever going to be able to replicate the speed, the functionality of how they do things. We've all been in the scenarios before where you're going to play a really dynamic quarterback, right? And for me, now that I'm a defensive coordinator, my head coach is going to say to me, "All right, well, who do you want to play scout team quarterback this week? Who's going to give us the best look, so to speak?" Well, if there's nobody on my team that can give me the same look that kid gives me, does it really matter? I've got to be able to handle certain formations and scenarios to keep him where I need to keep him. But if the guy that I'm playing is that much more dynamic than anybody we have on our team, yeah, we can put the best guy we think back there to quote unquote, what you would say, simulate that look, right? Well, if I can't match that look, the only thing I can simulate is the formations, the alignments, the tendencies. I can't recreate that dynamic player in the backfield. So, can we put a guy back there to get close to it? Yes. Can we put an athlete back there as opposed to maybe one of our quarterbacks that's a pocket player? Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with any of that. But I think you sometimes put a little bit too much time and effort into thinking about how good the scout team needs to be when in reality, the scout team's never going to be as good as the team you play, anyways. It's unless you're, if you're Alabama or Georgia or Michigan or Washington or Texas, yeah, you can probably put a scout team out there that replicates the other team. If you're Vanderbilt, is your best ever going to be able to match what Georgia does? Probably not. So do you really need that look per se that week? They're not going to be able to give you the look Georgia gives you anyways. So no problem, Dan. Thanks for asking questions. The individual blocks to the scheme you're facing, half line, etc. Yeah, I mean, we pod stuff. We do half line stuff. We do half line route recognition. We do all those things the same way everybody else does. At the end of the day, I think you still get the most work in team settings. I still think, our game plans are based on team scenarios and our game plans are based on formations and where the ball is. And, is there a time and a place for pod work? Yes, there certainly is. Is there a time and a place for half line? Yes, there certainly is. Are there schools across the country that can only do half line? Yes, there probably are. They don't have enough guys to give you a full scout look, so they got to do things in half line. It's to me, that's just part of the overall schedule. There's going to be pod work, there's going to be individual work, there's going to be group work, there's going to be team work, there's going to be team settings, there's going to be situational settings. I don't think there's one way to practice by any means. I think there's a lot of different ways to skin the cat. But as far as what you're practicing, I think there's generally a pretty good blueprint to say that, hey, we certainly need to work against these things. One of the things we probably do the least amount of, at least when I have a say in what we're doing on defense, is skeleton or 7-on-7. I don't do if I were scripting things, I would not do a ton of legit straight 7-on-7 because it's the least thing we see every week. I would incorporate I may do route recognition with the back end guys, incorporating their best passing concepts. I may do route recognition with our guys, incorporating the pattern or the coverage beaters that they're going to use. So I may get us, you know, I may get us in different settings with just the back end guys. I may get us into scenarios where we're playing palms and I show them the beaters that they run that we really need to be cognizant of. Um, but to me, 7-on-7 is one of the when I'm in charge or scripting things, it's one of the least um, at least statistically, percentage wise, it's one of the least group or pod scenarios we're ever going to use because you don't see enough of it on Friday night. I would rather have team settings with their best pass plays built into team than I would just to do 7-on-7. Do we do 7-on-7? Yes, we certainly do. We do it. We do it a ton in the off season. We do it a ton over the summer. We do it a good amount during the season, but when I was a head coach, I almost eliminated 7-on-7 deals. It wasn't realistic for everybody. It wasn't, during the season, at least, in our offense, we were maybe dropping back to throw the ball 10 to 12 times a game in your everyday scenarios. If we were moving the ball with what we were doing, maybe we only dropped back 8 times. Maybe we threw the ball 18 times, but that week we threw it 18 times. There were 4 RPOs and 4 quick game scenarios, 2 bootlegs, and 3 stand up or now screens. So there were 4 drop back passes called. So, to me, 7-on-7 is one of those things that's like, as a defensive coach, that's the least amount of time I spend, structuring a practice, scripting a practice. I could go a whole week without seeing a 7-on-7 setting, to be honest with you, when it comes time to play the football game, because it's just not what we see. It's not what we defend. It's not what we have to defend. We've got to stop runs. We've got to defend, things in the run game, and then we got to defend shot plays and some other things. But we very rarely have to defend people that are going to sit back there in the pocket throwing the football. That's just not what teams do. So I try to structure my practices around what we need to do to win games, not necessarily around, oh, hey, I went and watched Florida practice the other day, and here's the periods that they used, or hey, I went to watch the Jags practice, and here's the periods that they used, or to me, those things are great for knowledge. They're great to watch how teams practice. We don't have the time, we don't have the space, we don't have the fields, we don't have the GAs, we don't have the quality control guys to run a practice like that. So, to me, I think our practices need to be structured around what we need to do to be the most successful in a high school setting. We can all go to clinics and conventions and listen to people talk about how they practice. We've got 24 5-minute periods, and our practice is broken up that way. I think that stuff is great. I think structurally it's great. You can never go wrong listening to anything about that. But when you get back to your school, based on your field, your equipment, your coaches, your volunteers, can you really practice that way, even if it was quote unquote the best way, or even if you went to clinics or conventions and studied what everybody else was doing, would you be able to practice that way, even if you wanted to, would be my biggest concern, as far as practice setups are concerned. I don't think there's one way to practice. I think there's several teams that win practice in different ways. I think a lot of the things we do in football are kind of set in stone from a standpoint, from a standpoint of what periods do we need? What periods do we need to be effective? We're always going to be steered in the direction of, hey, here's how Nick Saban does it, and here's how, Jim Harbaugh does it. And, I think we're always going to be kind of navigated in that direction to say that your football practices should be run like this. But I think your football practices need to be run in the most efficient manner for you to get the most done with your kids and your staff that you can get done that week to ultimately give you a chance to win a football game. Yeah, scheduling is a pain in the ass, Galaxy, to be honest with you, trying to get everybody on the same page on a practice plan and making sure the practice plan functions without a lot of setbacks. And if you're mixing in special teams and guys got to help on special teams, now you have to have that scripted. If you are depending on how your staff is broken up, if you do have scout things going on, who's going to run those scout teams. To me, that's very important. So, like for us, the way we do things, I run the scout team for my offense and my head coach when he's calling the offense, and he runs the scout team for me when I'm on defense. And he makes sure that the scout group is right because we have the most vested interest in it. We've watched the most film. We know the exact things that we need to see. We draw the scout cards. So to me, it's something that we do with our staff that I really enjoy. Is it. Oh yeah, heck yeah, Galaxy. That's even more so. That might be tougher than the practice schedule. You know, Depending on the scenario that you're in and the program that you're at and what the expectations are. Um, when you start to get good and win games, nobody wants to play you. The games that you could have found 2 years ago, you can't find anymore. So now you got to go out and play better people. Obviously, the better talent you play with the schedule, now your opportunity to win games kind of fluctuates from years where you went out and scheduled 7 wins to years where now you've actually got to work to win 7 games. Our district and our classifications and our stuff in Florida, it's as good as the football is. It's probably the most backwards. Um, our coaching association is not very good. Our state association and the coaches are never on the same page. So, our stuff, our district conference stuff is always changing. And, you know, I've been fired twice as a head coach. Obviously, both times I never lost a teaching job. So I never did anything criminally, wrong or politically wrong. It was scenarios where they wanted to go in a different direction, probably to try and what they think in their mind is win more football games or change the culture of the program, whatever it may be. Um, but that's always the toughest part as a head coach. It's like, all right, well, here's the way I want to schedule. This is what I think makes our team better. But from the top down, they're telling you you need to win 5 or 6 games to stay. Okay, well, that's going to change my scheduling perspective a little bit. Right now, I'm going to go try and find some games that I think on paper we can win without playing our best. We can win even if we had a few injuries. But when you start to get good and you start to win, you won't find those games anymore because teams will stop playing it because it doesn't make sense for them. So, I think at our level, I think scheduling is just an absolute nightmare. It's a complete bitch. The 2 years that when you reschedule every 2 years, you get new contracts and finding the right amount of games, finding the right amount of games home, the right amount of games away, navigating a JV schedule into that whole thing. I think scheduling is in, it's its own unique and different breed of animal from all the other issues we have in football. But yes, Galaxy, I would say that scheduling 10 games is a pain in the ass. So, again, it'll be interesting. I kind of, when I go to a convention like the AFC convention, I find myself, or at least I find myself just people watching half the time. Like I try to look at who does what. I try to look at who's really going to booths to talk to vendors and who's just staying in the lobby and passing out resumes, who's actually going to buzz sessions to listen to guys talk and try and get better. Right. So I find myself, it's almost like Disney to me. When I go to the AFCA, I just kind of people watch. I sit back and I'm like, hey, let's check out what everybody's doing. And some guys have an agenda where they're there to network and pass out resumes, and other guys have an agenda where they're trying to become better football coaches, and other guys have an agenda where they're just going there to see vendors and they're going to buy things for their program. They're not really going to go to very many speakers or breakout sessions. So it'll be interesting this weekend. It's always good to be around other coaches. It's always good to be in the mix with businesses. And, for me, one of the things I'll be doing is pitch and play fast to some other businesses to see if anybody else wants to jump on board and, let them know the things that we do on YouTube and, let them know how many views we get and, how many followers we have and how many watch time hours we have. Cause unfortunately I'm on that side of the business too. So, I'll be there personally to get better, but I'll also be there to kind of branch out and see if there's anybody interested in the play fast setup of how we do things and the YouTube side of how we do things, which, to this to this day, 10 years later, the play fast community is still one of the most dominant on YouTube. I think there's a lot of guys doing things on Twitter now and TikTok and Instagram and analyzing college programs and analyzing college offenses and college defenses and NFL offenses and NFL defense. I think in their platform, they, they do a really good job what they do, but there aren't a ton of people in the YouTube world with what, our niche is with play fast, with what our, um, business model operating procedure is. We still have the market kind of cornered with that, based on views and things of those natures. So I'm always out there to pitch our business to other people. um, and then, if there's people I see that happen to be from a staff that I want to learn something about, I'm going to network. I'm going to talk to guys. I'm not really networking anymore to get a college job. I'm 51 years old. That ship has sailed. That window is closed. um, but if I see somebody from a program that plays something on defense that we play, I'm certainly going to try and network my way into a conversation to go, hey, can you tell me a little bit about how you defend 12 personnel from that structure, or how you defend 30 personnel, or whatever it may be. So, um, it's the beginning this weekend, at least for me. It's not, again, my experience of doing this a couple times, not the ball setting that a lot of us would want. Um, Glaziers and sometimes Nikes, and now we did one 2 years ago, and now there's some other clinics that are breaking out across the country. Those are your better football settings. The AFCA convention is more about the brethren of coaching, and the fraternity or community of coaching coming together and getting away for a couple days and talking shop and um, you know, doing all the things that you need to do to advance the profession. That's really what it's all about. But we've been on for an hour tonight, guys. I appreciate all of you being here. Tomorrow, unfortunately for me, is my first day back in the classroom. I make the switch from phys ed over to health, and I'm back in the classroom tomorrow. So I'm going to need to get a good night's sleep tonight and make sure that I have um, everything ready to go for tomorrow. Not recreating a wheel by any means, but having seating charts ready to go and first lesson that we need to get done. And then I'm going to miss Monday, Tuesday because I'll be in Nashville for the convention. So I got a sub coming in, so I got to set all that up. So appreciate all you guys being here today. Hopefully you got a chance to look at today's video talking about our evolution on defense. If you haven't seen it yet, check it out. I talk a little bit about our evolution on defense and how we changed from even to odd, 4-2-5 to 3-3 stack to tight front, three high, and how we were able to make those changes because the back end stayed kind of consistent, and how I think you can wrinkle and adjust your defense based on personnel and what you need to do to win your district or your conference, but also, um, you know, a way that you can wrinkle things without making wholesale adjustments. The way we do that is we keep the back end the same. So, Coach Del Gaze, I will talk to you tomorrow. I imagine on my way in at 6 o'clock, I'll get a text about something. But everybody else, good seeing you. Good talking to you tonight. Thanks for the comments. Thanks for the interaction. Take a look at that video today. If you didn't see it, I'm going to try and do another video tomorrow. I've got a punt video that I'm getting ready to put out there. I know a lot of the times our special teams videos don't do as well as the offense or defense, which really kind of pisses me off. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Pedro. It really pisses me off because I think personally in high school, if you really want to be different and you really want to get out there and create some exotic stuff, special teams is really the way to do it. You know, as a defense coordinator, when I get ready to coach a game, I've got to look at 3 to 5, 6 video games that we may have on film. I got to look at formations. I got to look at shifts, trades, and motions. I got to look at tempo. I got to look at tendencies. I got to look at down and distance. I got to look at shot plays. I have to look at all these different things and piece together all these, exotic scenarios to come up with a game plan. The special teams guy has to watch punt, and the other team punts from the same formation 50 times. Which one do you want to be? Do you want to be the coach that's working against the punt formation that is the same every single time that team lines up to punt? Or do you want to have to do your due diligence and your homework to know all the offensive formations and down and distance tendencies and concepts and things that they're using? Like to me, I would put all my eggs in a basket and say, look, we can get really funky on special teams. They line up one way to punt and they protect it one way. And here's all the things that we think we can do. So, what I noticed in the college game is a lot of little wrinkles and nuances to the punt schemes now, to where there's two-man shields. They're motioning guys a bunch and moving guys around. They're using unbalanced formations and end over, things that create different eligible receivers. And at least when you're talking about in terms of like punt stuff, you can't give up a fake. You can't give the other team the ball. So you always have to be cognizant of where eligibles are. So, exotic formations to punt the ball, motions and trades and shifts to punt the ball. That to me is where you can really make a world of difference, because if for me in doing this in 24, 25 years of doing this, every week you go to play a team, if they either punt in spread or they punt in shield, that's pretty much the two predominant ways people punt. So, as a special teams coordinator, each week, punt block, punt return, you're going to see one or two things. I think I've seen, if we exclude muddle huddle from, the scenario, I think I've seen two formations for teams to kick field goals in. They either bring a guy over to create a four-man side, or they're 3-3 with a wing on each side. It's the same formation every time you play it. So to me, I'm not saying it's easy to block kicks, but to me, why would you not try to get exotic and funky where you can coach a bunch of different looks versus one static look? If I get a pressure that I like and I want to install a pressure that week, I might see 10 different formations. I got to install that pressure 10 different, not 10 different ways, but I've got to be able to handle 10 different looks. If a team punts from one formation and I want to put a punt block in, I can get way more reps repping the punt block because they only punt one way. They only protect one way. So to me, special teams is where you can get really funky and exotic. I think, the more muddle huddle stuff you use, the more fakes that you incorporate into field goal stuff, the more that you can punt from exotic formations and different looks, the more that your kickoff coverage can change to where you change the splits, you stack guys, you come from, different bunch locations and you change the lanes of where you're running. Because, most of the time that's not what you see. You see a team and you say, hey, they kick off 6-4 this week. They like sky kicks and deep kicks left. Okay, well, shit, let's go attack that if we know that that's what it is, right? It's the one, to me, it's the one part of the game that stays like really, really stagnant when everything else is always changing. So, I think, and I'm going to do it hopefully tomorrow, I'm going to talk about the way I saw some people punting and the way Michigan and Alabama were punting. And, they were two-man shields and they had a movement guy and they had two gunners. And then they would also put both gunners on the same side and create a backside tackle that's eligible. So now as a coverage team, even if we're going to block a punt, all right, well, who are their eligibles? We got to defend fakes. The more you can change who the eligibles are, the harder you make it on the other team to diagram a block. The more you use one static formation and say, all right, we're a shield punt team. All right, well, if everybody knows you're a shield punt team, they're going to diagram every punt block they can to your shield punt because you never punt a different way. So I think special teams is undervalued. I think it's underutilized. Obviously, Alabama almost won a game because of Michigan's poor special teams play, but that was more poor special teams execution than it was just a generic, bland special teams game plan. So I think, to me, special teams is an area we can all get better in. So look forward to that video tomorrow. Talk a little bit about punt stuff and what I've seen. What I've seen in some of the games that I watch with how teams are punting, and hopefully we'll get that video out tomorrow. We have defended double wing and single wing in the past. The thing about single wing I can tell you about defending is you really got to hone in on who the keys are and what the tendencies are. Some teams it used to be, um, the fullback or the blocking back. To some teams, it's a certain guard. They change guards with when they're going to pull and who they're going to pull. Um, I don't think it's that much different from any other offense that you're defending. You got to take away what they do best. A lot of those teams can't really do multiple things. They can only do a few things well, and you got to take those away. But they're both a pain in the ass to defend. You don't see them a bunch. To me, double wing is balanced depending on what teams are doing. If it's flex bone, type shit, and you got option to deal with, it's a little bit bigger of an issue. Double tight, double wing, if they're bigger and more physical than you are, becomes a big pain in the ass. So all those things to me they're all fun. Every offense is fun to try and defend. Every defense is fun to try and attack. Depending on the personnel and how good you are and how good they are, it makes it a little bit more, or at least it changes the success rates. Like I get a kick of how everybody after Harding won a Division II national championship, everybody started talking about, well, they're flex bone and watch how they run the flex bone and watch how they do all this stuff. Well, if you go around the country, there's a bunch of flex bone teams that absolutely suck. They're 0-10, they're 1-9. So just because this team won the national championship running the flex bone doesn't mean we all need to bend over backwards and run the flex bone. I see a lot of clips on social media of single wing teams that are scoring 75 points a game and 600 yards of offense a week. And they're absolutely phenomenal. They're great to watch. They're beautiful. And then I see some clips of teams running single wing that, couldn't move the ball the length of their dick, or couldn't score 7 points if they tried, and they're still single wing. So to me, the system itself is more about how you coach it, how you structure it, who the talent is, what the talent is you're playing against. The biggest thing about double wing and single wing is you don't see it a bunch, right? So it kind of, especially the single wing kind of puts all of your defensive rules, sometimes at risk, and, with how the formations line up and the different exotics of who's eligible and where they can get to. But, to me, every offense is difficult to defend. Every offense presents its own unique challenges. And, we had one year. In fact, I played a single wing team in back-to-back years. One year they scored 50. The next year we had 30 or 20 something tackles for loss. So I've been on both ends of the spectrum with all those offenses. That week we would do what we need to do within our system to defend it, and figure it out from there. So hopefully that I didn't really answer your question cold draw, but at the same time, it would probably be dependent upon what they were doing from the double wing, what they were doing from the single wing, and the game plan would be making them play left-handed and taking away the things that they can do. If they can do multiple things from those offenses, then they'll present problems for most people, regardless of scheme. So appreciate you guys being here tonight. Appreciate all the questions. Appreciate all the comments. Hopefully I provided some answers that can help you out. Check out the latest video we did on our defensive evolution. Get ready for tomorrow or the next day. It's got to be tomorrow because I'm leaving for Nashville Saturday. Tomorrow's video on punt stuff and how I think you can get after people with special teams. All right. So thanks for everything you guys do for me. Thanks for everything you do for Play Fast. Remember, you won't play well until you play fast. Happy New Year. See you guys next time.